They say that you should make your Christmas cake 2 to 3 months before Christmas. Well, it's 10 weeks to go, so here we go with my Christmas cake. And I'm using whiskey for this one. I've done rum in the past, very nice. I've done brandy in the past, very nice. So here we go with whiskey. Lots of ingredients for this, so bear with me, guys. What I'll do, I'll put all the ingredients and the method in the description below, and I'll put little flash tags up on the video as we go through with the volume of the ingredients. So we got currants, sultanas, raisins, dried figs, glacé cherries, mixed peel, whiskey, butter, muscovado sugar, either light or dark, I'm using dark, eggs, plain flour, baking powder, mixed spice, ground almonds, whole almonds blanched, grated zest of 1 lemon, grated zest of 1 orange, and some crystallised ginger. Phew! First off, we need to get some alcohol into the dried fruit, get them drunk, so to speak. So, ready for the whiskey, we weigh everything out. I normally use a kilogram of mixed fruit, but I'm making my own this time. I think if you add them all up, it comes to a kilogram. So 200 grams of currants, 200 grams of sultanas, 200 grams of raisins, eventually. 100 grams of mixed peel. These are all very rough, mind. I'm sure the cake's not going to mind if you get it wrong by 10 or 20 grams. Or even 100 grams, I suppose. And 100 grams of dried figs. These need to be chopped fairly finely, but don't be too even with it. Variety is a spice of life. You want different sizes everywhere. These took a bit of work, actually. I've never cut dried figs before. They're quite hard. ,200 grams of glacé cherries. Conveniently, this is a 200 gram tub. I chopped about half of them, no, 3/4 of them in half. And the rest I put in whole. Now, I can do a lovely black cherry soaked in kirsch, but I thought that might conflict with the whiskey a bit, so I didn't use that this year. And yes, I just totted it up, and that was a kilogram. Give it a quick mixing. I don't know why I do this. We're going to mix it again when the booze goes in anyway. Speaking of which, in it goes. This is a 375ml bottle, so 125 mils. Third of a bottle. That's me trying to gauge it without actually pouring it out. Doesn't matter what whiskey you use for this, cheaper the better really. The alcohol gets flashed off when you cook it in the oven. All we're trying to do is get some flavour into the fruits. And here I go, mixing it in again. What a waste of time that stirring was just now. Cover the bowl and leave it overnight. And what I did, I just took the tea towel off now and again, give it a quick stirring, and after 2 mixes there was no whiskey in the bottom, so it all soaked in. Okay then, next day, time to start baking properly, and I'm lining my baking tin here. I got a push bottom one, 2 layers of baking parchment. I'm doing something different this time. I'm wrapping the bottom disc in the parchment and then popping it into the outside piece. This would be easy to do with a spring form tin. I didn't have one big enough. Well, not one to hand big enough. The idea of double lining the tin is we don't want the cake to cook too quickly, basically. Long and slow wins the day with no burnt edges. Line the outside of the tin with a double sheet of baking parchment. I use this silicone stuff. It's quite good, actually. Doesn't stick to anything, or nothing sticks to it. Right, here we go then. 125 grams of muscovado sugar. Like I said, I'm using dark for this. And 125 grams of softened butter. Now, I should have softened the butter a little bit more, actually. It was room temperature. I could have microwaved it for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Would have sped things up a little bit. Anyway, cream them together. Got there? Yep, that'll do. Just about brown and sticky. Okay, we need 4 eggs for this recipe. Medium or large, it doesn't really matter. For a cake this size, it doesn't matter. I always crack my eggs into a container first, or a cup first, have a quick inspection, and then put it into a jug or whatever. If you crack them all into the dish you're making and you've got a bad one, you've ruined everything. It's an old habit of mine, I tend to stick to it. Not much chance of getting a bad egg from the supermarket. But what if you buy half a dozen eggs from an honesty box at the roadside, 6 for £1, whatever they are, or your mate on the plot gives you some, or the bloke down the road gives you a dozen eggs. There could be a rogue one in there, I've had it happen, and they smell horrible. I watch some of these Asian street food YouTube videos where they do 40, 50, 100 eggs at a time, all cracked into the same bowl. What if one or two are bad, you know? Okay, now beat the eggs and stir them in a bit at a time into the creamed butter and sugar. 130 grams of plain flour. You can sift it. This says it's ready sifted, doesn't matter these days. 50 grams of ground almonds. Hurry up, Steve, they're getting impatient here. Somewhere around here a teaspoon of baking powder went in, but I can't find the footage. About a teaspoon of fine salt. I don't like using coarse salt, just in case it doesn't mix properly. It probably will, but I just don't like using it. And 1.5 teaspoons of mixed spice. And just to confuse you, I didn't reset the scales for the 25 grams of crystallised ginger, which we need to chop up. And again, variety is a spice of life, so don't be too accurate. And then 50 grams of blanched almonds. I've left these whole. And we need the zest and juice of a lemon and an orange. I had to say this 3 times. I kept saying jest and Zeus. You can leave the juice out if you want. It may make your mix a little bit runny, but I baked my cake for quite a long time, so it was okay. Well, that's it for ingredients. Mix the dry stuff into the wet stuff. I'm adding a little bit at a time, but it doesn't really matter with this cake. It's going to get so much mix in that any big lumps are going to break up anyway. In with the drunken fruit. And again, another mix in. In with the blanched almonds, the zest and the crystallised ginger. And the juice. And like I said, you can leave the juice out if you want. I'm glad I put it in actually, because it was a little bit thick. Give it all a good mix in so it all comes to be the same colour. Now there's no panic for this because baking powder, half of it's activated in the oven, whereas baking soda, it goes off straight away. Into your baking tin. Get the base sorted out first, and what I do, I get enough in there, push it to the sides and gradually work upwards, squashing out any air on the way. Give it one last podging down. I'll tell you what, I may have done this a little bit too hard actually. You wait till the end when I try and get it out of the tin. Scoop a little dimple in the middle, and what this does, it stops the cake from rising. We get a nice flat cake, easier to ice. Quite a hole actually, that's about 1 inch deep, believe it or not. And in the oven at 140 Celsius for an hour. Take it out of the oven after an hour, have a quick feel around. It's setting around the outside, middle's a little bit soft still. So what I've done, I've covered the top with a bit of aluminium foil just to stop things going a bit too brown. Back in the oven, 140 degrees, another hour. And here we are, an hour later. Looks done. Actually, lovely and flat as well.
Flat, nice and flat.
Quick steward test. Oh, skewer. My worms are getting mixed up today. If the steward, if the skewer comes out nice and clean, not sticky, it's done. I trimmed the parchment paper down a bit just to make the cake more manageable. Poked a few holes in the top and fed it with its first dose of whisky, about 2 tablespoons. I've done the first feed of whisky while the cake is still warm, just to get some of the whisky essence back into the cake. There we are. Then I put the tin onto a trivet to let it cool down overnight. Chuck a cover over it, keep that whisky in. Here we are the following morning. Just going to wrap the cake for storage now. Big sheet of foil on the outside. And a few of these. Now, I wish I hadn't bought this. It's foil lined parchment paper. Yeah, it's rubbish. So a couple of sheets of this just laid down, just so the parchment paper is touching the cake. We're going to leave the baking paper on the cake. This is just a bit of extra protection. Now this is what I was talking about. The cake was hard to get out of the tin. I had to turn it upside down and push it out, knock it out even. And it wasn't the paper on the bottom holding it in. The cake had swollen inside the tin. Note to self, springform tin next year, Steve-o. Righty, that's tight. There we are then. So turn it upside down. Fold all the paper foils and things around it. Almost done. One more thing to do is to make a little greaseproof paper lid for the top of the cake. Makes it easier to take off when you're feeding it. Now, I'm not going to be feeding this cake too often. Maybe once more, maybe twice. I'm conscious of the fact that some of my grandkids may be eating this. Don't want to see them drunk at 7 years old. Well, there you are, guys. Christmas cake all made, ready. Store it in an airtight container, biscuit tins ideally if you've got one. I'll feed it once or twice more, like I said. When you come to feed it, a little tip. If it still looks wet from the previous feed, don't feed it any longer. I'll put a card at the top right there to my Christmas cake icing video. It gets a lot of views around December time. I may do something different this year. Let's see. Take care, guys. Catch you on the next video.